I went from reading 0 books in 2020 to reading 12 books in 2021, one a month, and nearly reading every day. I want to tell you why I started it, how I was able to do it, and was it even helpful? Do I recommend it to you? And at the end, I'm gonna rank the 12 books that I read. So if you're interested, keep watching the video and you'll know more. Hello beautiful people and welcome to this video. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jad. I'm a fanatic of self-help slash self-improvement. I always try to improve no matter what I can in my life, whether that's skills, talents, grades, work, ethics, anything I can, and that's what I do on this YouTube channel. You can check out my other YouTube videos. You'll also notice that I specifically maybe focus more on finance, personal finance especially, because that's an area of interest for me. I'm studying in finance, and when I graduate I want to pursue my career in finance. So if you enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you like it. And if you also want to comment some book suggestions, I would really appreciate it, because I'm pursuing also this challenge for 2022, and hopefully I'm going to read more books this year. Other than that, let's get right into the video. I started this challenge at the beginning of 2021 for two main reasons specifically. The first is that I really like Dr. Jordan Peterson, and for those of you who watched my recent videos, I reference him quite a few times. He wrote a book that's called 12 Rules for Life, and I really wanted to read that book because of my fondness of Dr. Jordan Peterson. And on top of that, as I started reading, I was like, okay, well, reading for me is boring and difficult, but at the same time, I know that it's beneficial. So these three adjectives made it become a challenge for me, and I decided to challenge myself to be able to read more books this year, and I wanted to see how it'll turn out, and I'm sharing it with you now. So let me now show you the books that I read. Wait a second. That's better. So the books are right here. I read Letter to a Suffering Church, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, The Power of Now, The Saint, The Surfer, and the CEO. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read the two books by Jordan Peterson, the one that I just mentioned, and the sequel of it. I also read The Art of Not Giving a Peep. I also read the Book of Proverbs in the Old Testament of the Bible. I also read Atomic Habits. I read the seven habits of highly effective people, and The Psychology of Money. I think that makes 12, if I'm just gonna add if I forget any of them. As for how I was able to do it, I want to give you some tips that helped me as a non-reader or first-time reader to be able to get this challenge done and actually enjoy reading. To start, you want to set yourself a precise goal before starting the challenge, and that can apply to any challenge, right? You can tweak it along the way, but you make sure to be honest with yourself and not only tweak it because you're lazy or you're behind on the goal that you set. So for example, the rule that I set to myself was 1 book a month, and for me that was reasonable. What I did after that is even more important, which is dissecting the goal into smaller parts and smaller segments so that I know how much I need to achieve, let's say, per day, and that's what I did. So I took each book, I took the pages of that book, and I divided it by the number of months for the month I'm reading that book. And this way I knew how many pages I need to read each day. And there are some days that I didn't read. And for these days, for example, if I needed to read 10 pages that day, I would carry them forward for the day after. Or what I would do is I would recalculate the pages left of the book divided by the number of days left of that month. So that would add maybe a page or two per day for that month, which is nothing. So even if I slacked a bit or I wasn't able to because of studying or work, I would know that I can get back on track while doing everything that I need to do. Tip number 2 is try to read books that are intriguing and interesting to you. So if you're studying in a field that you like, well, read books about it so that you're more knowledgeable and you can go talk to people in class about it and challenge ideas that the professor talks about, or something that has to do with your domain of work also. That might be very interesting in your research that came out and someone wrote a book about it. If you're interested into fiction, that's also a very good way to start if you like watching series or things like that. You also want to diversify, so don't go on reading 12 finance books or 12 fiction books. just to keep things interesting and fun, change. And that's what I did. I first started with the psychology, which is 12 rules for life, and then I went to finance, and that's the psychology of money, and then I went to self-help and self-improvement, the 7 habits of highly effective people. And then I went to fiction in The Saint, The Surfer, and the CEO. I read some biblical books because I'm Catholic and I'm interested in that. So that's what also helped me be engaged and keep on reading, because I knew that I wouldn't get bored. And for some topic that I like, which is finance, for example, I knew that okay, this month I'm not reading finance, so it makes me look forward to reading finance next month. Tip number 3 is to keep the book with you at all times. Now, I liked reading actual paper copies because I wanted to build my own bookshelf and library of books that I read, because it's my first time ever reading. You can opt into reading on a Kindle or your phone or an iPad, and you usually keep that with you. So that's a very good tip that I found very helpful. And to keep it always with me, this means that if I'm waiting in a waiting room somewhere, or I'm early to class, or I'm taking the metro, or I'm riding in a car, no matter where I am, instead of looking on my phone and scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, I would go read 3-4 pages of the book, and that just keeps me more attached to the book. Tip number 4 is simple. Talk to people about the book that you're reading. This keeps you engaged and makes you think about what you're reading when you're saying it out loud, and makes you think of things that maybe you did not understand fully that you thought you had understood. And it keeps you engaged and keeps people engaged. Maybe they'll start reading the book with you, and this will begin a feedback loop that's positive. Tip number 5 is something that I don't specifically do, but I think is helpful for some of my friends who read, which is track your progress on an app like Goodreads. So this keeps a record of all the books that you read, at the same time the page you're on that book, and this gives you a percentage of how much you're done with that book. It keeps you engaged so that you know where your progress is. The last thing is something that I wish I did, but I didn't implement as much, which is choosing the book in advance. What I would do is that, I would say to myself, I have 4 days, 5 days left of the month. I still have some time to choose the book for the next month. And what happens is that these 4 or 5 days pass, and then I decide at the first of the month to order that book or to go buy it. And I wouldn't be able to do it on the spot, or the delivery would come a bit late, and then I'm late on that month. And it would just ripple throughout the months, and I would be late each month, and then I'll have to push harder to read more pages. So it's not a very positive loop that I put myself into, and I would suggest that you choose the books in advance and you order them. Be prepared to read in that month. Now that I shared my tips with you, I really hope you found them beneficial. If you did, please press the like button. I would really appreciate it. And at the same time, if you comment your own tips in the comments down below, that would help me definitely, and would help the people also reading the comments, and this way we can share our knowledge. With that being said, let's talk about whether I found it beneficial or if I recommend it. Now, definitely after doing it for 12 months and talking about these tips, I definitely found it beneficial, but to what extent? Let me tell you how I think of it. I see reading as a great way of condensed learning on a higher level. Now, before you tell me that crash courses on YouTube are much shorter and a much faster way of learning, let me explain what I mean. In my head, I imagine a hierarchy of learning methods, where at the bottom there's school, where you learn like everybody else, and you have to learn what the school gives you. The second method is videos, where you start getting into topics that you like and topics that are not specifically of interest for everyone, and you start pursuing that, and it gives you more knowledge. The third is books, where you start getting into higher levels of studying and learning, where you start getting into topics of more sophistication and things that might not be available to the public on a YouTube video. And that's something that really interests you, and you want to learn more about the theory behind it, or about the actual history and the details of it. And finally, at the top of the hierarchy, in my opinion, are peer-reviewed articles. And that's the epitome of learning. And you're at the edge of this new technology that you're learning about, and you're seeing what other scientists or researchers or doctors are talking about and researching about. So that's why I value reading. Another thing that I really liked about reading is that it lets you in on the thought process and the way of thinking of the writer. And especially if you like that writer, well, you won't get that much knowledge anywhere else. So, for example, I mentioned Jordan Peterson, a doctor that I really like. Well, if I watch interviews for him on YouTube or I read an article that he wrote, well, that's just knowledge that I'm gaining and it's very limited. But if I actually read his books where he wrote tens of thousands of words and it shows how he thinks and how he articulates and how he writes his ideas out and thoughts out, this would make me know more about him. And if I'm interested in maybe starting to think like him or get inspired by him, well, this is a very good way of doing that. The last reason, and I think that's just a side benefit, is that it replaces otherwise wasted time. So instead of just sitting down on your phone, and I'm sure we all have free time even though we might think we don't, it's very nice to gain some knowledge and read a book instead of scrolling through a feed somewhere on an app. And that's why I think you should start reading. I definitely recommend it, and I think you should get into it. Start with something that you really like and enjoy, something that's light and not difficult, and you'll see the benefit of it. Now, the final thing is that I'm gonna just rank the books that I read for anyone who's interested in reading any of them. And let me know if you want me to get into more details or a deep dive on a book that I read in a separate video after. Before we get into it, let me explain the reasoning behind my ranking. So I rank the books in terms of the knowledge and the benefit that they brought into my life. And number 12, as the book of the least benefit, was The Saint, the Surfer, and the CEO. I felt that it was way out of touch and I didn't like it. I wouldn't recommend it. It was trying to convey an idea, which I got what it is, but I didn't really like the way that it was presented, and I thought that it was very superficial. And number 12 is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I know a lot of you will disagree with me, and especially Graham Stephan, who I really like and I appreciate. But for me, the book was very, very basic and kind of close to useless. Maybe I think it would be beneficial for someone who's not into finance, who knows nothing about personal finance and is not studying it in university. But for me, it was very basic and kind of general knowledge that I felt like it was more of a sales pitch than a book. In number 10 comes Letter to a Suffering Church, and it's a book that the auxiliary bishop of Los Angeles wrote, and it was regarding the sexual abuse cases that were happening in the Catholic Church. Although I really got some great insight, but it did not add anything to my life, and that's why I ranked it this low. In number 9 comes The Power of Now, and I felt that it was very superficial and superstitious, actually, that I didn't really enjoy it. I would like something that's more based on science and facts. Although it brought me a lot of knowledge, I don't think it ranks higher than that in the list of books that I read. In number 8 comes the book of Proverbs, which is written by King Solomon. It's a book in the Old Testament of the Bible. I really like the ideas conveyed. It talks about wisdom and how important wisdom is and coming from God, but it did not add knowledge to me. And again, that's my criteria for the ranking. In number 7 comes The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Beep, which, don't get me wrong, I really liked, and I think that it has a lot of knowledge to be gained, but I don't think any idea stood out to me as the books that are gonna follow after. So that's why I put it in rank number 7. And number 6 is the second book of Jordan Peterson, which is called Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. They were very, very beneficial. Honestly, this person I adore, Jordan Peterson, and he has a lot to give and you have a lot to gain from him. But it was kind of underwhelming after the first book, which was just mind-blowing. So I ranked it in that position. Number 5 is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. Now for me, this was the most advanced I got into finance reading a book. Although I covered the more advanced topics in university, but in a book, this was the most advanced, which I really liked, and I know that I'm gonna do such a thing in this year where I'm gonna read a bit more advanced and sophisticated topics. And I really think that there's a lot to gain from this book if you're into finance and you have a base of what the stock market is and what ETFs, index funds, bonds are. Now it's getting more exciting. And number 4 is The Psychology of Money, which is a phenomenal book, and it talks about how we don't always take rational decisions when we're dealing with our money, and we really need to focus on the psychology and the behavior that we carry or do when we're dealing with money, and this will give us a better result in our investments, in our planning for retirement, and things like that. So I really think that there's a lot of knowledge to be gained by anyone reading it. And number 3 is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yes, I said it right first time. This book really sets the base for self-improvement and self-help. It really has these 7 habits that are that have been here for a very long while, and I think that they're general to anything and everything you try to do in life, and they're really beneficial. And number 2 is Atomic Habits, and this book for me was very interesting, and one idea stood out so much that I still remember it, which says that identity shapes habits and not the other way around, which I thought was the case, and I think a lot of people do too. So this changed my view on how I approach habits and how I try to change my life and change negative habits and make them positive. Ali Abdal has a very good video talking about this specific book, but if you like me to talk about it also and express my opinion, please let me know and I'll share my opinion in an upcoming video. And in number 1 is the book that made me start reading and made me want to read, and it's the first book that I read, which is 12 Rules for Life by Dr. Jordan Peterson. And the ideas are just mind-blowing in that book. Honestly, I love how this guy thinks. He's backed by facts, and what he says is just gems. Honestly, reading this book changed who I am. So I really highly recommend it if you're ever getting into reading books and you're interested in a bit of psychology, in a bit of how the human works, how we should live our lives and take care of ourselves and lead a life that we are proud of. And that's my list of 12 books. I'll update you maybe next year after I read 12 or 24, well, who knows. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.